Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
Here's Lavastida, first pitch swinging, drives one high and deep out to right center. Back on it, Mesa, it is gone!
But not a walk-off. Ninth inning, three-run homer for the Aviators, not a walk-off.
In their home ballpark.
Almost hit the pool. He almost hit the pool as well.
The Las Vegas Aviators up off the mat, fittingly in this town, have rallied to take the lead. Lavastida drills one to put his team in front. It's 7-6 Vegas in the ninth. We're hanging on every pitch in each of these dugouts. And now a swing and a fly ball high and deep out to right center. Deep off the bat of Barry. And Jacob Barry has walked off with a AAA National Championship win for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. Oh my goodness. A guy who hit just 8 home runs the entire season for Jacksonville obliterates a AAA National Championship winning shot to right center. And the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp are your 2025 AAA National Champions.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Tim Hanlon, and my little podcast is called Good Seats Still Available. It's our curious little weekly journey into what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us. Greatly appreciated. I hope you're enjoying the postseason in baseball. Some very interesting games going on in series and adventures on the diamond, on the highest levels of professional baseball. But this week, as you can hear, or did hear in our little clip here to set up the show, we're going to go into the minors where most of the playoff action is pretty much done, and including a really interesting little twist that the minor leagues do these days, at least at the AAA level. They have a championship game between the winners of their two leagues, and in this case, the Las Vegas Aviators of the Pacific Coast League, the champions of that league this season, obviously looking over their shoulders as the construction seemingly continues for the team that will likely put them out of business, the supposed Las Vegas A's. We shall see about that, but I digress. And in the International League, the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, perhaps one of the best names in all of minor league baseball, although there are quite a few for sure, that not only did they win their International League pennant this year, but they, of course, as you just heard, won the playoff game that was actually held at Las Vegas's home stadium there just in the north section of town there. And it's fascinating, the minor leagues, because it has been sort of just a linchpin of professional sports and certainly baseball in this country for 100 plus years. And as we know in previous conversations and discussions around the topic on this show, a dramatic redrawing of what minor league baseball is. It's known as Minor League Baseball, MLB.com. And the corporate structure is now firmly in the grip of Major League Baseball, something that was done in 2021 in the fading light of the crisis that was the COVID pandemic. An excuse, perhaps, conveniently, don't know, but Major League Baseball, of course, is now reconstituted minor league baseball as an organization firmly in control of and oversight by Major League Baseball. It is now comprised of geez, let's look at the stats. I think it's as of this recording in October of 2025, 208 teams now comprise the official construct of minor league baseball. That does not include the 82 or so teams that are part of the independent baseball leagues. Those were the leagues that were not lucky enough to be chosen or folded into the minor league baseball official system. I'm talking like the Atlantic League and a few others. But I mean, if you put them all together, though, they constitute what is the umbrella of "quote unquote" minor league baseball, just generically described. But minor league baseball as a thing, as a specific entity, is about 208 teams. So for argument's sake, let's take those 208 teams and add the 82 teams. We're talking about 280 plus teams or so, 290 teams that play in "quote unquote" minor league baseball. And that's a pretty rich assemblage of teams, lots of small markets and mid-sized and even large markets like Jacksonville and Las Vegas, pretty large markets. And we can debate whether this new construction overseen by Major League Baseball is a good thing or not. We can debate whether the 40 some odd teams of that total that are solely owned and operated by one entity known as Diamond Baseball Holdings and all their private equity money. We can debate that if that's a good thing or not. But we cannot debate is the stability of that and the marketing prowess now of this assemblage of teams. I mean, there's no greater merch story than those of minor league baseball. There's just crazy team names. There are names that are occasionally given for a weekend, perhaps, or just even one game, as we saw with John Oliver doing up in Erie, Pennsylvania, famously on his Last Week Tonight show. There's all kinds of, and the fun never really stops. The inventiveness, the creativity, the promotional swagger is still very much part of the minor league game. And again, we can debate whether it's corporatizing and losing some of that luster. But for now, it certainly is the alter ego, if you will, of Major League Baseball and making it at least somewhat fun relative to other professional sports. But in our conversation this week with our guest, George Pawlush, we're going to talk about how the minor leagues, frankly, almost died, if you can believe it, in the late 1940s and early 1950s. There was a time when minor league baseball was not guaranteed to sort of keep going. I think a lot of people sort of give the minors kind of just a pass, really. People think that they've just been around forever, and they have. And Major League Baseball has been around certainly forever. But there was a time, as we'll hear in our conversation coming up, as the World War II ended, this period of time between 1946 to 1963 was really a dramatic time where minor league baseball was truly went from boom to bust and almost went out of business. We're talking about a number of clubs here that it's astonishing. There were 59 leagues and almost 450 teams in 1949. So that period of time from 46 to 49, when everybody was getting back into the swing of things, literally, in America and in getting back to work and the economy was booming. Everybody was hip on baseball again because it was, in many respects, the only game in town. It was fun at the old ballpark, and it was an incredible amount of teams and leagues. But it was not sustainable because by 1950 or so many other things were starting to happen around the country. The advent of television being one of them, for example. The winnowing began and pretty much in earnest. There were lots of movements and whatnot, and there was a whole bunch of reasons for why by 1963, literally hundreds of teams in the minors had folded, and in essence was at a critical juncture until the American League and National Leagues came together to create a player development plan in which each major league team would essentially step in and provide and pay the salaries of players and personnel for a number of teams across the various leagues of play and the various divisions. Without that step in, if you will, by organized baseball at the time, the minors may not have lasted past the mid-1960s. That is part of the discussion that we're going to get into with Saber nerd George Pawlush. We love our Saber nerds because these guys are the ones and women who are the ones who literally go through all the minutia and the detail and the real painstaking research about all kinds of stuff in baseball. And as you'll hear in our conversation with George coming up, just craziness when it comes to the promotions and the travel, and in essence, the soul of baseball really was in a dramatic period of time, from boom to bust to at least stabilization as the 1960s wore on. You're also going to hear an example of one of those leagues that literally came and went during that period of time. It's called the Colonial League. I believe it was in Class B at the time. And without sort of getting too detailed, you had AAA, AA, single A, and then you had these three other levels, B, C, and D. And it was literally just a cacophony of teams and stuff. And it's just a sheer cobweb of teams and players and the way that all of the that dynamic was created. It was relatively easy to set up a baseball team in the minors during that period of time as it was growing, but soon it was discovered it was unsustainable, and we're going to get into sort of that drama, that story, and the crucial moments, frankly, that wound up saving minor league baseball and enabled it to continue. Two books we'll put in your head for the moment, and you'll be able to find these books easily available through our friends at Amazon through our convenient referral link that you'll find in the episode description of this show, however you're getting ingesting the podcast this week, or in our YouTube feed, or on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 417, and you'll find a couple of convenient links that way. The two books we commend to you. One is When Minor League Baseball Almost Went Bust. Yes, the period of time between 1946 and 63 that we'll be talking about. Edited by George Pawlush and some other authors that made contributions. That book is available. And the specific book about the Colonial League, The Dawn and Dusk of the Colonial League, also written by George. And again, that's a period of time, a microcosm, if you will, from 1947 to 1950. Both of these books, a fascinating window into a period of time in the minor leagues. And that's the topic du jour. Here we go. Let's get to it, shall we? We had this conversation. He's about a month and a half back, only getting to it now, but happy to do so. Please, as always, enjoy. Give me and our audience a sense of what your adjunct is into baseball and history and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, this is your professional career or a sideline or something in between?
My background was I started off as a sports information director at Wilkes College, now Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre, PA. And, after 3 or 4 years, I had an opportunity to move up the ladder, and I became the school's director of public information. So from that point on, I was pretty much out of sports for almost 40 years. And I went on from being the school's director of public relations. I went into healthcare at a new hospital that was just starting in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, is where Wilkes is also located. After I spent a couple of years there, and then I moved to Connecticut, where I worked at Yale New Haven Hospital in New Haven, Danbury Hospital, and my final job, 10 years or 16 years, was at Greenwich Hospital in Greenwich, Connecticut. So for those 40 nearly 40 years, I was completely out of sports, but I always had an interest in writing sports. And since I've been retired since 2013, that's what I've been doing. I've written 3 books and numerous articles for newspapers and also for SABR in their various publications. So I guess I was always probably meant to be a sports information director or into sports, but you can't really support a family on the salaries that those people make. So I did sort of take an exit. I went into public relations and marketing, and had a very successful career. And as things would have it, when I retired, I was able to resume my interest in sports, and baseball was probably the major sport that I covered. And
Yeah.
I've written about.
So what is it about baseball that tickles your fancy, and frankly, a whole generation of sports fans who just love to indulge in the game, and it just seems to be the most written about and most story filled of all sports in the U.S.
I guess I go back to when I was 5 years old, and I bought my first pack of baseball cards, and it was the Topps 1953 issue. That was the year that Topps hired a bunch of artists, and the cards were beautiful, and that just caught my attention. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to play baseball. I was pretty bad at it. But as life would have it, my sons were very much involved in baseball and in high school. And I followed them in high school. My son was a member of a team that won the 1993 Connecticut State Championship. So going through that. And, after my sons graduated, I got involved in American Legion baseball, and I was the state chairman in Connecticut for 6 years. And I was the tournament director, and I was in charge of everything that, went on in Legion baseball. And I did that for, as I said, 6 years. And it just was something, it's the people. That's what it's all about. It's the people that I met. And, it's a simple game, but the people that I was involved in the Legion, there were blue collared men, and they were teachers, they were professionals, they were doctors. It covered the whole gamut of professions, and it was really America's sport, and that I met so many great people, and my interest basically is in the period of 1946 to 1963. And that's where I've done most of my writing and my research, because that was a time when I was a kid, and I didn't realize it, that minor league was going through such a transition, and how important it was in developing players and all the things that happened during those years. So again, that's basically how I got into, and how I'm still in, and how much I enjoy baseball, and particularly today minor league baseball.
All right. Well, we're gonna end on on the today part, right? Which is still a story that's evolving. But I'll take us back though. Let's go to kind of the beginning of the premise of this particular period of time and the minors. 1946, a convenient retrospective year to kind of perhaps start, given the fact that obviously the Second World War was ending, and a lot of servicemen were coming back, and arguably the U.S. was starting to look back inward about its own economy and growth and all that kind of stuff, and having won the war and feeling more than confident about its future. Take us into minor league baseball, maybe near the tail end of the war, as well as the beginning of this period after the war, because by most accounts, especially in your book here, 46 and the years afterwards were, dare I say, pretty healthy, and maybe too healthy.
Well, it was really an era of good feeling. During the war, many players, who would have played minor league baseball, signed up for the draft, and many of them lost 4 years when they could have been playing. So, all of a sudden, the war is over. The players are coming back into public life, and it was like, okay, I missed the 5 years, but maybe I still have a chance of making the major leagues. And at the same time, as far as entertainment, minor league baseball was pretty much it was a cheap entertainment. There weren't too many things going on right after the war, and so baseball really was the thing to do during the week, and on weekends there were double headers. You could take your family. The admission was pretty reasonable, so a family could afford to go. And basically, at that time, there really wasn't too much competition with other things, and so it was a feel good period of time. It was also a time when younger players out of high school, players who had been holding up for 4 or 5 years and not by serving in the military. And so gradually and really it started I would say slowly, but it really built up to a crescendo where by 1949 there were 59 leagues, and
59 leagues.
59 leagues.
That's insane.
And 448 teams, and over 10,000 players were involved. And one thing to note about the players, in 1949 there were 10,000 players, as I said, and estimated. And I would say that 99% of the players were white, because Jackie Robinson broke the integrated baseball in 1946 when he played with the Montreal team, and then he came up in 1947 with the Brooklyn Dodgers. But in those 40s, there were very few black players in the league, and so gradually after Jackie Robinson, it started to build. But still, by 1949, there was only maybe a couple hundred that were in the minor leagues. It grew significantly after that, and so it was a special time, and as I said, it was a transition. No longer was it a white man's game. It was really, with the Latin American players coming, being involved, and the African American players being involved. By 1963, I would say half the players that were in the minor leagues were either African American or Latino, and half were Caucasian. So it was a big change during that era. But in 1949, which was the high watermark of minor league baseball, as I said, there were 448 different teams, and most of these teams, I would say a good portion of these teams, were independent. And when I say independent, they were responsible for paying players, travel, and they were responsible for per diem, and they were responsible for just about everything. Stadium rental, was an issue. So the independent teams had to recoup all their money, to pay for these expenses. And their only income really at the time was, this is for the independent teams, was the admission of people coming to the stadium. They might be able to sell. Some had the opportunity and were able to have concession stands. Many times the municipality that was renting the stadium really had control of the concession stands. They also got some money from billboards and programs, but that was minuscule. What a lot of these independent teams really look forward to is signing a player and eventually selling that player to a major league organization. That was the only way that a minor league team was going to be successful. They really needed that money by selling a player to the major leagues. Now, the major leagues had of the 448 teams, major leagues, had relationships with 233 of the teams, and that varied. Some of it was, with the higher classifications, the major league teams paid for the salaries of the players that were under contract with a major league team. But as you got down to the lower levels, it varied, what the major league teams did for their affiliates. And in some, it maybe provided one or two players per team. There was no standard of what major league teams did with the minor league teams. And this was a situation in 1949, and in shortly after that, as it hit its high water mark, it began a really steady decline from 1950 to 1963, and we get into 1963. From the 58 leagues, there were just 18 leagues that survived, and there were 129 teams versus the 448 teams that was just 13 years before. So there was a major transition that went on between 1950 and 1963.
So let's back up for a second. You're talking basically about roughly half in the late 1940s of these teams that were literally independent of any formal or semi-formal relationship with the bigs, right? What is the operational infrastructure of those, right? Because there's obviously a background of support from on the major league level for the teams affiliated with them, at least on some level,
right?
But how is the talent dispersed, and how are the games being, legitimately umpired and scored and standings and all that kind of stuff? Is there a discrepancy between these two, or are they all kind of aligning around the common rule book despite their ownership's difference?
Well, the ownerships, I have to go back to the Colonial League, which I wrote the book about it existed from 1947 to 1950. And, taking a look at that, and that was pretty typical of what was going on with many of the other leagues. The Colonial League was considered part of the lower minors. When you look at the structure at that time, you had AAA, which was the highest, and most of those players were financed, and the teams were financed by major league teams. As you got down into the next level, AA, it was maybe less and less. All the players who had contracts with the major league teams and who had been assigned to the minor league, they had their contracts paid by their major league teams. And then as you got lower into the lower minors, at that time there was a Class D, Class C, Class B, and that didn't necessarily mean that the lowest rung of the ladder was Class D, or the highest in the lower minors was B. The B, C, and D classifications were based on the city where the team was based. So if it was based on population of the teams in the league, and if a team in a league came from an area, let's say, where cities were 100,000, most likely they were classified as Class B, and teams that came from towns of 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever, they were Class D. That didn't mean that talent was any better in Class B than Class D. It's just how teams, lower minor leagues, were organized at that time. That all changed later on, I'm sure we're going to talk about the changes that were made in 1963. But
I'm
it
sorry,
was
George. These were also geographically rooted as well, right? So they were the Class B leagues of a certain larger size, right? But there's a geographical connection, relative easy, well, close travel, right? It's not like,
well,
yeah.
well, I'm just taking the Colonial League again that I've done a lot of work with, and they were located in cities in Connecticut and New York. We're talking about Poughkeepsie, New York. There was a team in New Jersey, and so your travel you travel probably was under 100 miles, so which was that was pretty good compared to some of the teams out west that had to travel 10, 12 hours to get from game to game. So it was relatively easy to get to, for teams to get to play each other in the Colonial League. The big problem is that because these teams were, again, none of the Colonial League teams ever made any money. And the problem is that they really pinched the budget, and one of the problems was, and this was pretty evident in all minor league baseball, they traveled by bus, and the buses that they had were sometimes third or fourth owned, so they weren't the safest buses in the world. And in the Colonial League, there were instances where buses failed and brakes failed, and fortunately there weren't any major accidents, but there were accidents in out in the far west in the California League, where a bus was traveling on a mountain route, and unfortunately there was a car that came in the middle of the road, forced the bus off the highway. The bus tumbled down 300 feet, and 9 people were killed. This is in 1946, and then in 1948 you had another situation in Minnesota, where the Duluth team was traveling, and they were hit head on by a truck, and again 4 or 5 players were killed. And these buses weren't driven by bus drivers; they were driven by either the manager or some of the players would drive these buses that, as I said, might have been 10, 15 years old, some 3 times owned, and with a lot of issues. So that was one of the big issues with minor league baseball post 1946. During the 40s and early 50s, safety was a factor, and unfortunately the team skimped and didn't see this as a priority, and unfortunate that really that was part of the thinking as these independent teams from 1949 to 1963, all the independent teams were wiped out. They basically could not afford to none of them made money, and they couldn't afford to keep going. And how the teams were financed, in the Colonial League, there was one gentleman who was he had a seat on Wall Street, and he wanted to own a team. He had played baseball at the University of Virginia, so he bought a team, and in the Colonial League, there was another in Waterbury. What they did is basically had 34 owners. They had 34 people who put up $100, and that was their capital to start the team. And then there was another 2 owners in Bridgeport. That one of the owners had a hotel or had a restaurant, and there was land in back of the restaurant. So, he built a field back there, and he had a veranda in the back of the restaurant, so the patrons could watch the game while they're eating. And it was a very interesting situation. That park was built in 15 weeks. The Colonial League was organized in January of 1947, and by May 1st, they played their first game. So during those
and why the I guess the thing and in this particular case and with all these other leagues and stuff, why the mania? And frankly, where are all the players coming from? I mean, was it literally that much demand to field baseball teams around the country, or like what was driving all of it?
Well, it was in these small towns, and that was basically, 300 of the teams basically were in the lower minors. And, it was a source of entertainment, and all these teams basically had probably one or two of the locals, which attracted, people to the games. And again, as I said, it was a cheap night out. There wasn't really much competition at that point. Things changed in the 50s, and, I can go over some of the things that were going on that basically, almost kill the miners. And, it was very important for the towns. And that was a tradition, prior to professional baseball. If you go back in the 30s and you go into these various towns, I'm from northeastern Pennsylvania, and I can tell you that, on a Sunday, every town had a team, and they had these amateur leagues. People came from church. They went to the game on Sunday afternoon, and that's where they spent the whole afternoon watching the game. I mean, that was it. I mean, the men worked during the week in the coal mines, and on Sunday, the entertainment was attending the baseball game. And they sold beer, and it was like, it's like a party, but they went to church before the game was played. And this really was a tradition, and it continued, right after the war. But a lot of things came into focus after that really everything changed in America in the 50s, and these changes really gave people opportunities to do other things besides go to the local game.
Let's also talk, you mentioned it before, maybe that's a good time to double click on it a little bit. I think this is sort of an event that, essentially, I don't know, it was the starter's pistol for the beginning of the decline. But it certainly was if you look back in history, Jackie Robinson's call up into the majors and breaking the color barrier in 1946 and 47, really actually had a lasting effect on what we're going to talk about in the 50s as well. It was certainly a contributory factor, I think, to some of the ultimate waning of this velocity of minor league baseball.
Well, the Colonial League in 1947, I think at that time there were maybe 12 African American players at that time in minor league baseball, and 7 of them played in the Colonial League. And just getting back to how these teams operated, and this is pretty much how teams in the lower classes, classifications, as I said, B, C, D, and most of those teams were, again, independent. It was like the rosters were about 15 players on a team, but during the course of the year, when a player got hurt, he got released. And so a team during a typical year might have played 35 different players. Now we're talking the minor league season started in May and ended in Labor Day. So they played 130 games. But during that time, players came in, came out, and it was constant influx and outflux of talent. And very few from the Colonial League, very few players actually ever made the major leagues. There was one player, Ruben Gomez, who played for the Giants in New York in 1954 when they won the National League championship. And actually they won the World Championship because that year they beat the Cleveland Indians 4-3. And but Gomez played that year, and he had a pretty good year. He had double figures in the win, and actually he pitched the first game in San Francisco when they moved to San Francisco in 1958 for the San Francisco Giants. But he was really the only player out of all the players over the years that played in the Colonial League. Now, the Colonial League also. There were a lot of players who got a chance to play Major League Baseball, during the 40s when everybody was off the war. And, some of these guys also wound up, playing in the lower minors. The salaries were, at that time were between $200 and $300 a month. And so for a season, a player could make, $800 to $1,200. And that was sort of it was a lot more money than you would make working at a gas station. And, many of these players, had jobs on the off season. And some of them even had jobs during the season, especially some of the pitchers, that they would, there was one guy from Waterbury who was a teacher. So, he would pitch, every fourth game or whatever. In the meantime, he would be teaching, and the games were at night, and he would sort of make it work. So, it was that type of thing. But again, this was pretty typical of what was going on all around in the minor league baseball and the lower levels.
Were the players moving around? Were they being called up, so to speak? Was there any coordination amongst the leagues, both of those overseen by the pros as well as the independents, or not?
There really wasn't. Basically, what happened is that the talent was at the AA and AAA level, and those were the players that were going up and down. And every once in a while, the minor league teams, especially the independents, would sell a player, and he might go up to class A, at that time. And that person might have an opportunity to get into AAA. And, every once in a while they made the majors, but that really is far. It didn't happen that often, but there were a lot of players that, again, without the minor league system and at this time, and even though it was on its way down, there were still players that benefited by the system that existed. And of course, as I said, during the 50s, the complexion of these minor league teams changed because, again, they were no longer pure all white teams. The teams began to become more, even with the African American and the Latino players. And by 63, it was a whole different than it was in 1949. It had taken a complete turn as far as the players who made the league. So the talent, the African American players showed their talent. They had an opportunity to play, and they beat out a lot of these white players who otherwise some of them would have made the majors, but unfortunately they weren't good enough to compete against the Black and Latino players.
Yeah, I think people forget that while not only Jackie Robinson, of course, broke the color barrier by going from the Montreal Royals in the International League up to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 47, it was also the beginning of the end of the Negro Leagues too, right? Which had been for a couple of decades, right? The the only source really for African American players to play. And in some respects that too was another layer of competition, if you will, or just, I mean, the fact that you were talking about 400 and some odd teams and all these leagues and stuff, that the Negro leagues also existed at the time too. Obviously they were beginning to wane as well, but it's a glut, right? And people also forget too that around this time, we're talking 1950 or so, there were only 16 major league teams, right? That's it, right? And
That's it.
underneath, you've got this gigantic foundation of hundreds and hundreds of teams and dozens of leagues that it's just completely imbalanced, right? And some of that probably had to play a part.
It was imbalanced, but I'll tell you, the New York Yankees, Brooklyn Dodgers, and the St. Louis Cardinals took advantage of it. Some organizations had affiliations with maybe 10 or 12 minor league teams, but New York, Brooklyn, and St. Louis had more than 20. They really stockpiled the talent. In 1950, the Yankees had two AAA teams, one in Denver and one in Kansas City. So, they were stockpiling all this talent and selling these players, and were able to, to get, get some good players in return. And basically that was what made them successful. If you look back and look at the amount of world championships during those 40s and 50s, you will see those three teams dominated. And they had the money, they put the money into minor league baseball. A lot of these other teams, the Philadelphia Athletics, Boston Braves, they were drawing maybe 200,000 or 300,000 fans a year, while the Yankees were drawing 1 million. So, again, they didn't have the money to sink into the minor leagues. So, the three teams that I mentioned were able to really, it was like they had a lot of players, and, it was just a matter of, chance that some of these guys would turn out to be really super. And, and that was really, those are the guys that were moved up to AAA and went into the major leagues and made them successful. The Yankees, especially, and the Yankees were really great for most of the 50s, and they didn't really tail down until the 60s. It really was an interesting time. And but again, the sad part of it, you had mentioned the black players, and after Jackie Robinson, there were a number of players that came from the Negro Leagues and became joined the major leagues. But some of these guys were at the end of their career, and it's sad that they never had a chance to play with the best when they were at their prime. It was sort of like, they're in their 30s and 40s, well, in their late 30s, but yet, they're rookies in the major leagues, and, they're hitting 300, but, they're only going to get maybe 3 or 4 more years in. And I think the last major league team to integrate was the Boston Red Sox. It took them 11 years to integrate and have their first black player, who was Pumpsy Green. But the teams that, integrated early, and the Dodgers definitely, right after Jackie Robinson, there was Roy Campanella was the next year, and Don Newcomb, and all these guys were, fortunately, those two guys were not really among the players that were in their late 30s. They were probably around 30, 31. So they still had a lot more years. And unfortunately, Campanella, who was a great catcher, was in an accident and paralyzed, and his career ended, rather early. But, that, again, that was some of the things that were going on in the 50s. And
Well, tell me about some of the cultural stuff that was going on in the 50s too, that began to
affect
pressure the minor leagues economically and viably.
Okay,
Some of
I
these are
think
not obvious to certain people of a certain age, right? So,
well, everybody talks about television kill the minor leagues, which was
well,
not
it's a
true.
contributing factor, right? But it definitely
Yeah, but
explains
they
it. Go
only
ahead.
the games were only televised on Saturdays, in the early 50s. So that really wasn't much competition because the minor leagues basically played night games and they played, double headers on the weekend. Some of the things that really impacted minor league baseball in the 50s, first is the demographic shifts of people. After the war, you know, people, and once the economy settled down, people were buying houses and, we're assuming, there were a lot of jobs available. And so many of them moved out of the urban areas. And I'm looking at Newark and Jersey City. They were very successful AAA teams. Newark was a farm team of the New York Yankees, and Jersey City was a farm team of the Giants. And both these cities had stadiums. They drew 300, 400,000 people a year. But, by the late 40s, a lot of the people from the inner cities, were moving away from the cities and no longer, were they attending games. And the other thing that you forget about is that, during the war, the production of cars, you couldn't get a car. Everything was dedicated to the military. So right after the end of the war, people slowly but surely began buying cars, and no longer were they really, isolated to their home. They could go anywhere, and so there were other options for entertainment rather than going to your game. And a lot of these, and that basically what happened. Going to a minor league game wasn't the big thing that it was in the 40s when you sort of lived close to the team. You were now, living somewhere else. And again, you had a car, so you were more mobile. And there was, at the same time too, there were a lot of other things that people could do. You had leisure sports like golf and bowling became big. So a lot more people were involved in that. Another thing was the emergence of youth leagues, like my Little League Baseball. I believe began organized in the early 50s. So, some of these fathers and kids who used to go to the games, the fathers were now involved in going to their kids' games. So, they no longer, that was no longer, a major group that went to the minor league games. Houses, there were people who went to games because it was outside, and on a hot summer night, you had the cool breezes and all that. But air conditioners became popular, and people, it was, why go to the game and sweat a little bit when you could stay home, being air conditioned and watch your TV. Now, it wasn't necessarily sports they were watching, but there were a lot of programs, Arthur Godfrey, and there are a lot of those type of programs, and people would rather stay home than go to a game.
And there were also, besides television, which was huge, right? Especially
Right.
the growth from the 1950 to 1960 was just explosive. There are, there's just seemingly a whole bunch of other entertainment options, right, for one's leisure dollars, right? In sports, but also just elsewhere. I mean, the movie
Oh,
business boomed, and drive-ins and all kinds of stuff, right? So there seemed to be a lot more um, chasing for that entertainment dollar than just maybe a smaller amount of choice when baseball was in the small towns in the 40s.
well, it's people had more independence and they had more choices, and they sprouted their wings and did different things. And baseball, again, the whole nature of baseball changed because as the independent leagues started, and it was really a big drop in the 50s. I mean, they're probably dropping about 5 leagues a year, and so those small towns where you had the hometown boys playing, and which was a reason you went to the game. Those were the teams that went out of business. I just I mentioned before about the Colonial League. Uh, you know, uh, you know that started in January, played their first game in May. These teams form leagues without having a business plan. They had no clue. They had no financial budget. They really, they weren't completely sure where the money was going to come from. Today, before you do anything of a major scale, you want to have a marketing or a business plan that tells you where the money's going to come from and includes all your expenses. And based on that, you want to make money at the end of the season. And believe me, no team in the Colonial League ever made money over those 4 years. And there were some people that were sole owners that, basically, lost 20, 30, or $40,000. And if you look at in today's with the conversion rate and so on, it's equal to probably $500,000, that they lost. But the guys own trucking companies, they own companies, and they love baseball. And unfortunately, they didn't do their homework. But again, it was like a time when people weren't totally realistic, and they were so happy not to be involved in war in Japan and war in Europe, and they just wanted to get out of the house and do something. And the minor league, many of the teams, and I in my book about the Colonial League, I talk about the Waterbury team, and they had a person who was the general manager. They had 34 owners, but they were smart in getting a general manager who was very creative, and he was very big on having events. In addition to baseball, there was other entertainment that would entertain people who weren't necessarily 100% for baseball. I mean, they had, at that time, there was Max Peck and who was what they called a clown, and they would hire him to come in, and for 2 innings he was dressed in a baggy uniform. He had his hat turned sideways, and he would contort himself, his face, and it would be like the Harlem Globetrotter types of things, and the Savannah Bananas. It was that type of entertainment that, in addition to the baseball. And there was one I have to tell you about. There was one incident that they did in Waterbury, and it was really it was something that there was a record that was set in 1938 when a guy from the Cleveland Indians, they threw a ball off one of the buildings in Cleveland, the Cleveland Terminal, and the player caught the ball, and it was 508 feet that he caught the ball. So that set the record. So Duke Delpo, who was the general manager, and again, he was very big in promotions, and he was recognized nationwide for doing crazy things. And what they did is they got the mayor, who was 400 pounds, in a helicopter. They flying over the Waterbury Stadium, and they attempted to break the record, the 508 foot record, dropping a ball from the helicopter. And they had two catchers at that time. Team had 15 guys on a roster, and two of them were catchers. And so they had their catchers. They had helmets on. They had shoulder pads, and they dropped one ball, and one of the catchers got caught it at about 500 feet. And then they tried for the record, 725 feet. They dropped the ball. The catcher missed it. It broke his arm, and he was done for the season. And not only was he done for the season, he also drove the team bus. So they had to get someone else to drive the team bus. But these are like some of the crazy things they did to get additional interest, to the games and get people in. And when you had Max Patkin and Al Schott at your game, usually it tripled your attendance, and it was your biggest attendance of the year. And
which also highlights maybe what was waning with the core product.
Yeah. Well, and another interesting point, at this time, it wasn't uncommon for the major league teams during the season to make an exhibition game with these low level teams. And there's an example in 1947 where the New York Yankees, Monday was usually the major league team's day off. And so, during the 1948 season, Duke had connections with George Weiss, who was the general manager of the Yankees. So they came up by train, and they came to Waterbury, and they had dinner. They had a dinner for them, and then they had an exhibition game where they drew like 9,000 people. But the thing of it was, this was in the middle of August. The Yankees were in the middle of the season. At the end of the season, they were 13 games. They were in first place, 13 games on top of the next team. And here they are playing an exhibition game. You wonder why do they play an exhibition game? Well, at the time, while these minor league players might have been making $2,000 for the 4 months, major league players were only making $5,000 or $6,000. So, this gave them an opportunity to pick up a couple dollars, and that's why they did it. It was extra income for them. And this happened. The Washington Senators played a game against the Bridgeport team, and so it happened it happened a lot. And not only did the major league teams play the minor league teams, they played the semi-pro teams too, because in the late 40s, in addition to minor league baseball, semi-pro baseball was very big, because what would happen is that the players would have a job during the week, and on the weekends they would play. And there was a team from Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bushwicks, which was a semi-pro team, and they drew more than the Philadelphia Athletics in one of the years. So there was interest not only in minor league but in semi-pro, and some of these semi-pro players could make more than some of the players in independent baseball. So again, it was a totally different time. Baseball, you can't believe that this happened, but it did.
Take us in the early 60s and tell us literally at the precipice of what was going on. I mean, you had dozens of leagues that had folded. You had, but it not only was taking, frankly, those independent teams, but probably some of also the affiliated teams too. I think the rate of decline was cutting into the bone, so to speak, perhaps, of what minor league baseball was all about.
When you got into 1963, there were no independent teams left. I mean, they just financially could not compete, and they were all out of business. And again, a lot of the minor league teams, and I'm not talking about the Yankees, I'm talking about the Boston Braves and the Philadelphia Athletics and the St. Louis Browns. The affiliations that they had in 1950. And again, it's questionable. What did they get? Did the affiliated teams get? Some of them got some players. There was no standard of what they were getting from Major League Baseball. They were maybe getting some subsidiaries. I would imagine, Yankees and the Cardinals and the Dodgers were anting up some money. But a lot of these other teams, were in financial distress. I'm talking about major league teams. So, they divest themselves of their affiliated teams. So, we get into 1963, there are 129 teams and, less than 3,000 players, 18 leagues, and, things weren't really looking good. So, and baseball realized that they needed a farm system. They needed to be able to develop players. So they came up with in 1963. I mean, they said, we've got to change things around. So what Major League Baseball did was come up with a reorganization, and with this reorganization came that in '63 we were now up to 20 teams because in 1961, the Los Angeles Angels joined the league, and then also the Washington Senators. And in 1962, you had the Mets and the Houston Colts. So you now had 20 teams. So what they basically did is that these 20 teams were responsible for financing 5 teams at 5 levels. And what major league teams did was they were responsible for all the salaries of the players in uniform and the coaches, and they provided some equipment in baseball. And the teams that were all, most of them were independently owned. They weren't, they were affiliated, but they were separate organizations outside of baseball, and they were responsible for getting the stadium and some of the other expenses. But Major League Baseball pretty much took responsibility for those 5 teams. So that's set with 20 teams and 5 with each responsible. You had 100 teams that were financed. So they weren't going to go out of business but Major League assured that they would survive and they would be there to train the players and so on. The minor league baseball at that time was still governed by an independent organization that had really been in effect from 1903. So Major League Baseball did not run minor league baseball. That changed in 2021. And that's when the second change was made. And, Major League Baseball basically, instead of 5 teams, they now sponsored 4 teams. And that meant, 2 teams in each division were, they were out of baseball. And how it was structured in 2020 was that Major League Baseball took control, of the whole minor league system, and basically were responsible for 4 levels. And what they did is in the rookie leagues, that used to play, used to play in leagues like the Appalachian League and the New York, Pennsylvania League. Those, instead of playing, at various sites in various leagues in the country, they played a short season, 60 games, and the two levels played at the spring, the spring complexes were, spring training complexes. So, they were housed where the major league teams practiced in February and March, and it was a short schedule. So in other words, all the players that were drafted in June were by Major League Baseball were playing at the major league complexes in Florida and in Arizona, and so that was the big change. But other things, that the teams that lost their team in minor league baseball, a lot of them turned into being college leagues, and where the major leagues would provide baseballs, but they were strictly for players in college.
Yeah, like the Cape Cod League, et cetera, and the wooden bats too.
The Cape Cod League is the prime example. It's probably one of the top college leagues in the country. And, if you make the Cape Cod League, you are really one of the top prospects, and what has happened with the college teams playing in the summer, college, it really is less pressure, and major league teams are basically, they love this situation where they have the colleges developing the players, and they have their rookies that play, in their facilities, their spring facilities, and I think it's really, they're not drafting as many players out of high school. The big thing in drafting high school players is, they played high school. You don't know how they're going to perform.
They're also 18 years old, right? So they don't even have a few years of like collegiate maturity behind them.
Right. And you go into college, you're going to develop that maturity. And it's just like, it's taken the place of the low minors. But the major leagues don't really, have to put a lot of money into these college leagues. In addition, there's still independent minor league teams that have been organized over the last 20 years. And
which Major League Baseball conveniently calls affiliated leagues, right? Which is basically their way of saying independent, right?
Yep, they're affiliated. And if you look in the paper, during the course of the year, some of these guys are, they washed out of the major leagues, and so they're given it a final shot playing for these independent teams. But some of these guys, end up back in the major leagues, and the minor league independent teams sell the players, and they make money on that, and it's a better relationship than was with the independent teams back in the 60s. And the talent wise of these independent teams are, most of them have played minor league baseball, maybe washed out after one or two seasons, but they all have prior professional experience. It's not like the players of the 50s and 40s, coming right off the streets, or, from the high school diamond, or, players who played during World War II, who basically weren't needed anymore because the players were coming back from the war. So, they wanted to give it one more shot, and they used the minor league, these lower classifications to try to give it one more shot. But
right. So it's interesting that you juxtapose 1963, this reorganization of minor league baseball, and the most recent one that happened in 2020. Let's maybe use this as a coda to kind of cul-de-sac this sort of arc here. The 2020 reorganization, right, I think was jolting to a lot of people because, as you hinted, right, there still are, but there were still a new breed, if you will, of independent or affiliated teams or the like. But I think a lot of people looked upon this as sort of almost like a purge, right? Almost like the end of innocence, if you will, of minor league baseball.
Well, what happened was 60 teams who were minor league teams, uh, you know, they lost that minor league status. And, some of those 60 teams, just, they just folded. But the majority of them became they became college homes for the college, the summer college teams. There was a small group of them that went into independent baseball, because they had some of these facilities. That the big thing over the last 30 years is the facilities that all these baseball teams have. When you were talking about stadiums in the 1950, you had those wooden stadiums that were built in 15 months. You had a bunch of stadiums like a Waterbury Stadium that was built in the 30s during the WPA. They were in terrible condition. And that was another reason that people stopped going to the games. These stadiums were really in bad shape. And so today, probably starting with the 70s and 80s, major leagues came up with criteria on how the stadiums had to operate. How they, for fans and as far as dressing rooms and so today even the teams that lost their minor league team, they're still beautiful stadiums, and again, these college teams are run by people own them, and they're run to make a profit, and through either admissions, again selling billboards and getting certain people to come up with a syndicate type of a thing, but they're organized to also make money. So it's not even though it's an amateur thing, the person who is running these teams is running them to make money, and he's not selling players, but he's somehow they're making money for advertisers. Some probably have some TV contracts, and so
but it's also part of helping Major League Baseball in a more specific and desired way. And I guess this will be my last question for you. Put this in perspective, right? This reorganization in 2020, the elimination of a bunch of those teams, and maybe a redeployment of them independent of the system, can only be looked upon as Major League Baseball truly, if not owning, certainly dictating and or homogenizing, or at least putting into place a top to bottom structure that minor league baseball should or needs to fit into. Is something lost or something being lost in that process? And I'm gonna stack the deck in this question by also reminding you and our audience that entities like Diamond Holdings, which owns, I think now 30 plus teams by one private equity owner, has now even standardized and or homogenized it further. Have we lost something in this, or is this a necessary evil to keep Major League Baseball and the minors healthy going forward?
Well, Major League Baseball, needs a minor league system. You look every day and teams are, bringing up players and sending down players, and they really need these minor league, and the word that came about in 63 was vertically structured farm systems. In other words, that's how they're structured. You move up the ladder, and players will, play in the rookie league. Some, some will make it, maybe half will make it, and half will get into, the low A, and then some will make it to the next level, which is high level A, and then get up to double A, which is basically the Eastern League and the Southern Association and the Western League, and then finally triple A, which is the International League and the Pacific Coast League, and basically that is, the talent. The talent is the best talent is double A and triple A, but to make the jump from rookie to get into double A, not too many players make it. I mean, they have a draft, and they draft 20, 30 players. I'm not quite sure of the number, but out of that, only maybe 10-15% will proceed to the next level. You know what I mean? So but that's what they need. That is what the major leagues can't survive without having a vertically structured farm system. And
so you don't think it, okay. So I get that. I mean, and I think, and certainly Major League Baseball is probably very happy to have a private equity entity hoovering up teams and stuff to stabilize it further and or make more solid business underneath. But I guess my wrap up question would be, do you sense, especially given somebody who's looked at this period of time when minor league baseball flourished and flamed out and then had to sort of scrape its way back with the help of Major League Baseball, do you think anything has been lost in this process as we're consolidating and corporatizing minor league baseball, or is that just an era of time or is it still just as fun and frivolous and enjoyable as it used to be? It's just modern times structured now.
I think as far as these teams, they all have business plans. They're all making money, and I understand that there are,
and real estate. It's all real estate plays now too, which is mimicking the majors.
And so they're in it. They're all successful. They're not gonna lose money, and again, there's advantages. Now, at these AAA stadiums, selling paraphernalia like shirts and that all adds up. Plus, concessions and the tickets, and they really, as far as marketing the teams, they do a great job in doing that, and and they just promote them and market them a lot. And this wasn't happening back in the 50s. Forget about marketing. Okay, you had a guy like Duke Delpo who did some things to get people interested in coming to the stadium. But that's what they're doing today in minor league baseball. They're doing a lot of promotional things and really going after the younger element, getting them interested. You can go to minor league game and at a fraction of what it costs to go to a major league game. And, I think that baseball itself is probably better run, better financed. And, but again, I think that, and with the college leagues and with the independent leagues today, I just think that players are the best players are making it to the major leagues, and they're getting the work they need, and I would say they're better off right now. Even though I feel bad for the 60 teams who lost their minor league teams, but what's going to happen in the next couple of years? They're supposed to be adding 2 more teams, so that means 10 of those teams that lost their teams will probably come back in to minor league baseball. But just the whole idea of these college leagues, they have really the people who run them, as I said, it's sort of when you go into Cape Cod, all those little towns have a team, and they get great, response from fans from that town. A lot of them are vacationers, and it's almost like things were back in the 50s, in the small towns, with their leagues and their teams and so on. So I'd say overall, it's a whole different design, but I would say that I think that baseball is a real good place. I had problems when they announced that they were going to be contracting teams, and teams that had been in baseball for years would lose their affiliation. But I think that with what Major League Baseball has done, especially with creating these college leagues, I think it really is. I think it's been a good, it's a good way to keep those towns that had lost their teams, keep them into baseball. And the people who run and own these college teams are, they're first class. And, it's a great experience for the college players. A lot of the, they're housed by the fans, actually, so that part is taken over by volunteers. So the players don't have to worry about, paying for rent or anything like that. And so I believe that minor league baseball, it had to be this way. It had to develop to this point, or it really couldn't exist.
All right, our thanks to George, and 2 books for you to find and devour to learn more about the minor leagues of this period of time, dramatic as that time was. The first one is published by the SABR folks. That's the Society for American Baseball Research, and where all the astute scholars of the sport of baseball live. It's an amazing organization, and they love to geek out on all this stuff, and we love it, because without them, we wouldn't have half of these stories now, would we? The first book, again, is called When Minor League Baseball Almost Went Bust, 1946 to 1963. It is authored and edited by George Pawlush, our guest this week. You can find that wherever you get good books, or the various links either in this podcast episode description or on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, episode number 417. Just search it up and it's right there, and Amazon will take you away to the link that will get you the book as quickly as humanly possible, and we'll get some shekels of referral love in the process. If you don't want that book, or in addition to that book, how about that? You can get the other book that George has got out now, relevant to this conversation, and that's The Dawn and Dusk of the Colonial League from 1947 to 1950. That is also available. That is self-published, but is a breezy but intriguing read about the 4 years, actually, of this league that played in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, and was typical of the boom and bust cycle that was going on in the late 40s and early 1950s in minor league baseball. That, too, available in the same places. Check both of them out. Buy them if you would. And thank you for supporting the show if you choose to buy them through our links. We appreciate that. You can follow George and his colleagues and their antics at SABR's website. That's sabr.org. That's SABR.org. And you can follow us online at goodseatsstillavailable.com. We post all of our episodes there. You can stream them. You can send them to other people that you think might like to get a little taste of the show. Of course, the best way to ingest all the proceedings is make sure you follow us, or what am I trying to say? Subscribe, of course, to our feed. That's obviously the best way to make sure that you don't miss a thing. And what else? You can send us email if you'd like at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And again, the website is the place for, we've got sponsors up there and all kinds of other goodies and whatnot. There's a search engine in there. You can find the topic or whatever that you might have missed. And let's see, you can also follow us on the various socials. On X, you'll find us at Good Seats Still. You will find us on Blue Sky at goodseatsstillavailable.com. And you will find us just about everywhere else at Good Seats Still Available, all one word, including YouTube, where we also stream these shows. It's another way to consume the proceedings each and every week. Our thanks, of course, as always, to the splendiferous Jerry Payne and his audio excellence. And thank you for listening. More fun to come next week. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, but I assure you, you will enjoy it. And until then, take care of yourselves and others. Thanks for listening.